making the dough. Now, there are many ways you can do this. You can do it by hand, which is a little bit more time consuming, but basically what you do, you make a well of dough in a bowl and you mix up your eggs together, add your eggs a little bit at a time. So I think I'm going to do one batch like that, and then I'm going to do one batch in the food processor. You see the recipe there, it says 4 eggs with the flour. I think we're going to make like a batch and a half, okay, of the dough. That should be enough for what we're going to do today. If you want to make the full 2 batches, by all means, go ahead and do that. That's not a problem. But you probably want to use the dough at least after class, maybe finish rolling it out, filling more ravioli, making more pasta or something. And if you're going to, with the pasta, I would suggest you leave it out and let it dry fully. And then you can just pop it in a Ziploc bag once it's fully dry. If you want to keep it damp, then freeze it. But you need to freeze it flat. It takes up a lot of room, all right? With the ravioli, you can fill them, cook what you want, and freeze the rest. Now, when you freeze them, you want to cook them from frozen, the ravioli, all right? If you let them defrost, what's going to happen is they're going to go all slimy and yucky, all right? You cook them from frozen, you'll just cook them at a low simmer for about at least twice as long as we're going to cook them for, all right? So that's just a heads up on that. If you have a food processor, it's great. You can do it in a mixer as well, but the food processor is a little easier, I think. And it's very simple. There are lots of different ravioli, different pasta recipes. When you're making pasta at home, you just want to use all-purpose flour. The pasta you buy isn't made, it's sometimes made with durum flour and other things, but you basically, or semolina flour. It's easier to work with at home if you make it with regular all-purpose flour, okay? So I'm going to make a whole batch first in here. So basically, if you've got your food processor, you want to just break 4 eggs into your food processor, or again, your mixer as well will work. And then we'll do a little batch the old-fashioned way. We'll make it by hand, okay? Now, you just want to combine these, mix them up. That's all you're going to do. Just to mix your eggs so they're not all the yolks together or whatever. All right, so just mixed up like that. And then what you're going to do, you're going to start adding your flour. Now, if I had $1 for every time I said this, I'd be a millionaire. Recipes react according to, or work according to what sort of flour you use. So I don't know what sort of flour you've got. I don't know how long you've had it. I don't know how you stored it, etc., etc. So the amount of flour you need to get the right texture dough can vary. I have 3 cups on the recipe. It usually only takes about 2 1/4, 2 1/2, again, depending on your flour. Also, the eggs vary slightly in size as well. I've used 4 standard large, which is what I generally recommend, but it may vary. So what we do is we add our flour in small amounts, and then I will show you what we're looking for texture-wise. I'm going to put you on my overhead camera so you can see. Here's my mixer, and I'll show you the texture we're looking for. So start off with those 4 egg yolks that we have, the 4 eggs that we have in here, 1/2 cup of flour and another 1/2 cup of flour. So about a cup of flour, all right? And pop that in like that. So a cup of flour and our eggs. And then we're going to mix that together just till it's all fully mixed. And what you should have is a fairly sort of like a thick batter right now, all right? Nothing like a dough at this point. So now we're going to start off, we're going to add a 1/2 cup of flour roughly at a time. So 1/2 cup in, put your lid back on, it's tight, and then mix it. And off. Now, depending on your food processor, you may find that this, because I find with this particular model I'm using, sometimes it doesn't like this sticky dough and it'll kind of seize up a little bit. So I often end up with the last stage, sometimes taking the dough out and incorporating the flour separately. Now my mixture is sticky, way too sticky, all right? What we're looking for is a dough that comes together and it's slightly sticky, but you can get it out of here without ending up with it all over the place and all over your fingers, all right? I'm just going to pulse this. I often find the food processor at this stage kind of prefers it if you're just pulsing. Now, if your mixture starts to break up and look like it's too floury, don't worry. It will come together because you shouldn't. I mean, I've got what, 2 So let it run until it comes back together. Okay, so that was only 2 cups. It depends on the time of year, okay, and the flour and all those other things I was talking about. So my dough now is a little sticky, but it's all come together in here as one solid lump, okay? So because I'm doing this in this machine, I am now going to actually put a little bit of flour on my work surface, and I'm going to get this out, mind the blade. What you may find, if your food processor is having a hard time, you might want to do what I'm doing. Take it out and incorporate the last bit, even if it's very sticky, because sometimes my other food processor does this. The food processors aren't, the very heavy juicy ones are good. This one is not as heavy juicy, but my other one's not very well at the moment, so I'm using this one. And sometimes the dough gets up inside. So you can start it in there and you can put it out on the table and just incorporate your flour. Now mine, if you can see mine, okay, most of this is a little bit there, it's a little bit soft, but if you can see, it's damp, but it's not sticking to my hands. All right, now mine now feels damp. There was one patch on mine that didn't add flour as well. It was on the top, so I'm adding a bit more flour to that. It's better actually to have it too wet than too dry, and you'll see when we go to roll it out why that is. All right. So as I say, if I really press my fingers in, my fingers stick a tiny bit, but I can toss it from hand to hand. It just feels slightly damp to the touch. All right. So that's kind of what you're looking for, and you'll get this. I mean, after you've done it a couple of times, you'll get to know the feel and what you're looking for with your dough. All right, it's a trial and error thing. And as I say, depending on your machine, it depends on how well it works. I must admit, pasta machines don't like a lot of dough. Sometimes, if your machine's really resisting, do a half batch at a time. That sometimes works. I'm going to wrap this up, just either put it in a Ziploc bag or wrap it in plastic wrap, all right? Because we're just going to let it rest. I suggest you probably put it in your fridge. Actually, my kitchen's so cold at the moment, I think I'm just going to leave it out. You don't have to put it in the fridge, but if your kitchen's a bit warm, pop it in the fridge. All right, how are we doing, guys? Steph, are you doing yours by hand? Good, that looks good. Do you think it's not sticking too much? Good. Meredith, how about you? No, don't worry. If you've got stuff all over your hands, don't worry about it. Hannah, how are we doing? Good. All right, I'm going to show you, again, you don't have to do this by hand method if you don't want to. I just want to show you what I'm going to do. So I'm going to do, I'm going to do about a cup and a half of flour, all right, for this. And I'm going to take a couple of eggs and I'm going to mix those together for the same reason we want them obviously mixed together evenly. So just going to grab a little fork. By the way, if you want coloured pasta, spinach, don't use food colouring. Spinach is a great thing to make it green. Beets, I think, are great to make it pinky red. And then, of course, squid ink is what you make black pasta with that you can't usually get. So it doesn't really help, does it really? But And then, of course, you can do things where you just literally fold in like spices, or not spices, parsley or basil or something, where you'll get it flecked with if you put the herbs in your food processor or the spinach in your food processor and mix it with your eggs so it all breaks up, then you'll get greenish pasta. If you put it in towards the ends, you're going to get like flecks with green flecks in, which is really pretty as well. Okay. All right, so I'll just show you this method. So this is like the old-fashioned method of making pastry. I do it on the table. I think it's easier. It's a little than doing it in a bowl. A little bit of the dough, the egg in the middle, and then you just start bringing in flour from around the house. This is the way I learned to make pastry dough when I was in high school. I used to do it like this, but with water, not eggs. So it was always the way you made it before the days of food processors and everything else. So back in the dark ages. And the reason you do this, it just means that the egg doesn't go all over the place and you're just adding it gradually. Just keep bringing your flour back in. It's all going to be stuck into your fingers, but don't worry about it. A bit more. And you usually find when you do it by hand, proportionately, you need a bit more egg, usually. Because it doesn't blend quite the same way that it does when you do it in a machine. Yeah, I'm going to probably need a wee bit more egg, I think, in a minute. So I've actually got 1.5 cups, and I've already used 2 eggs, so I'll just grab my bench scraper. These bench scrapers are a great idea when you're doing something like this. It just helps to. Yeah, I'm going to go with a 3rd egg. So you can see I'm using a lot more egg in the handmade one. A little bit more. There we go. It'll come together. You just start molding it a little bit like this, and it should start to form into a dough. You just kind of knead it a little bit. It's not too difficult, really. You don't panic too much. It just, you're just looking to get a dough, and that's the most important thing. This dough's going to be a bit yellower because I've got more egg in it. Yeah, I think this is an invaluable tool in the kitchen, not only for cooking, but for cleaning up afterwards. It's great for scraping your work surface and getting all the flour, anything else that's stuck on it, into your dough. So kneading it a bit so that I incorporate most of that. I'm going to go with what I've got here. I don't want to add that last bit of flour because it's going to make my dough too wet. All right. So that's my handmade one. It doesn't matter that it doesn't look pretty because by the time it goes through the pasta machine, it's going to be fine. So I'm going to pop that in there. So that's basically a recipe and a half, even though I did use 2.5 eggs. The amount of flour I've used means I've about 1.5 batches. So that should be enough for the time frame we have to make our dough, our pasta. Whew, scrape all my hands off. I'm going to clear this up. Makes a bit more mess this way, but never mind. You don't have to clean the food processor with this. All right, I'm going to make more mess later, so it's pretty good. Now, I hope you guys all pre-roasted your butternut squash. If you didn't, you're going to have to put it in the oven now. It takes about an hour to cook. And I should have said on the thing. I think I did say on there about pre-do it, but hopefully you did. All right, I'm going to give you guys a couple of minutes to finish those. Pasta's an interesting thing because it's kind of a bit like, my sauce. whatever. Everyone seems to have their own version. But it's very simple. You'll see recipes with other ingredients, but it's very, it's just simple, I think. With the eggs, you could use a bit of water, I suppose, but why would you? And just a nice, easy recipe, okay? So some of you doing the hand one? Yes, looks like Steph is. She's working her muscles there. So the object of this class is to teach you how to make pasta. So that's why I've chosen the sauces, the fillings we're using are pretty straightforward because we want to emphasize and spend our time on working with the dough, okay? You can obviously use the dough for anything you want, and you can make your own variations on sauces, your own special sauce, whatever you want to do, okay? But as I say, we're just using a couple of my favorites, which is the butternut squash, I love, ravioli, and the mushrooms, sun-dried tomatoes, and peas, which are probably my 3 favorite vegetables, for the one of the cream sauce one, and then a very simple tomato one, which obviously this time of year is not ideal. Better to be making this in the summertime, but get you ready for the summertime so you can make it in the summer. But it'll be fine, but it's better with really, really good tomatoes, and the tomatoes are really, really good, okay? All right, so let's just look at the butternut squash recipe. Again, this is not difficult. We're doing minced shallots, the butternut squash. And my butternut squash I have in my bowl here. It's still in the skin. I'm going to take it out. We're going to cook the shallots first. So I'm going to chop up my shallot. Now, if you haven't got a shallot, onion works just as well. I always just think the shallot is a posh onion. What was I doing with my knife? It's all in the onion family, so it really, if you don't have one, that's fine. And this is a pretty big one with 2 parts to it, so I'm probably just going to use half of it. I can split it easily. There we go. So peel the outside off. Now we do want this minced up because it's going in our ravioli and it's going to need to be small. So what I want you to do, and obviously we're only doing a small amount here. I normally would only do half a cup of butternut squash. So when you slice onions or shallots of the same shape, what you want to do is, and I'm going to go on the other screen so you guys can see this. This is my go-to technique that I always teach everybody. So here's my shallot. Here is the stem end I've cut off, and here is the root end I've left attached. All right, so it's still attached right there. So what you're going to do, and you can use a small knife for this if you want, or a big knife. Put the point of your knife in near the root, but don't cut through the root, and then cut down like that. Okay? Try and do this, turn it around this way. I should put my camera on the other side. And then about 1/4 inch next to that, you're going to do another one. And then another one. And you're going to carry on doing that across your shallot on both sides. Now, the beauty with doing this, because obviously, if you just hack the onion about, you're going to have all different sized pieces. Doing this, you should end up with fairly equal sized pieces. So mine, if I splayed it out, it would be like that, splays out like that, okay? So I'm going to put it down, face it towards me, hold it with my fingers like that, and then make little small cuts the other way, and you will get your pieces much more uniform in size than if you did it just willy-nilly chopping it up, okay? Why is that important? Well, shallots and onions in particular, but all vegetables, you want them to cook at the same rate. If you have a big piece of onion and a little piece of onion, like a big piece like this and a little piece like this, they're going to cook at a different rate. By the time the big pieces are cooked, the small pieces are going to be burnt, and that makes them bitter. Whereas if they're allowed to cook nice, to translucent, they'll all be the same. They'll be sweet. Or if you want to caramelize them, you get them all caramelized at the same time. You don't get some that are still raw and some that are caramelized. So that's the importance of trying to cut evenly. And onions, I do exactly the same way. And in fact, it's almost more important with onions because they're much bigger. All right. So I'm going to get my trash bottle here. Keep wandering around. Keep my trash bottle over here. So with this onion, with our shallot now, what we're going to do, we're going to saute it. So let's go back to this. So I say a large skillet, we're not making a lot of filling, so you can probably do it with a fairly medium-sized skillet. You're going to melt a little bit of butter in there. 1 tablespoon of your butter, roughly. Again, doesn't have to be exact. You could do it in olive oil if you want. Well, I must admit the butter is nice with the butternut squash. All right. Pop that in. Melt it. Medium heat. And then once it's melted, you are going to put your shallots in and we're going to cook them for about a minute. And then we will take our butternut squash, if you haven't already. I'm taking the skin off my butternut squash. I wish you could buy it already cooked. You probably can, but it just seems, I mean, I have to think of something else to do with another 3/4 of a butternut squash. Although I love butternut squash, unlike Anita, I could eat it with a spoon and butter quite easily. More piece. Usually you can get it off of your fingers, just pieces being a bit resistant. There we go. A bit more on there. All right, it's in there. Yeah. So the shallots first, and then really we're going to add the butternut squash. We're just going to cook it for a couple of minutes because it's already cooked, and then we're going to season it with some salt and pepper. I've got white pepper on there, but you don't have to use white pepper. It's up to you. Just remember, if you're using white pepper, it's hotter than the black, so you might need a bit more black if you're going to use black. All right. Let your butter melt fully before you put your shallot in. Okay. I think I need one of those like they had at the inauguration. You know, one of those. Invisible screens things. Well, I don't know how they do it. I'd love that. I could just go like this and check the recipe as opposed to looking down all the time. I wonder if you can buy them. You probably can. They're probably really expensive. So we're going to cook this, and then once we've cooked it for a couple of minutes, we're going to salt and pepper, and then just add the cream, cook for a couple of more minutes, and then turn it off, add a bit of grated cheese and nutmeg, and season again to taste, so check the salt and pepper, and then cool. And we want it to be cool completely before we make the ravioli, so we'll cool it, put it to one side. We're going to make all the fillings first, and then we're going to come back and roll out the ravioli. All right? They're pretty much melted over here, so I'm going to put my shallots in and let those cook for a couple of minutes. There's a couple of escape bits of shallots and chop up. And you might want to just take a fork and mash your butternut squash up a little bit. You don't need a masher, you can just a fork will do it just to break it up a little bit. Now, because we have a fairly small amount, generally things like this drying out and then cooking a bit is going to take less time than it would if we had 3 or 4 times as much, okay? I hope everybody managed to get sage. Sage is a funny thing. It's got a strange sort of taste and everything, but I actually like it. And this sage butter is really good, which we're going to make in a little bit. So remember, it's the onions we want to cook because obviously our butternut squash is already cooked. So we want to make sure those are soft, because when we form the ravioli and cook them, the inside really only warms up. It doesn't actually cook anymore because it's not in the boiling water for long enough, really. It's just enough to heat it through. So that's why we want to make sure that our shallots are cooked and soft. So if you think they're cooking a little fast, turn them down a bit. Let it take a little longer so they don't burn or get brown. Just want to be translucent. It's a cold day today, isn't it? We have a new puppy. We have to take her out every like half an hour, 40 minutes. I was out there at 7:30 this morning in my PJs. It was so cold, like 13 degrees. I'm like, oh, I go, hurry up, go to the bathroom, which she did, fortunately. All right, mine look fairly soft. I know it's kind of hard for you to see. They smell good. They look like they've gone translucent. So I am now going to pop my butternut squash in. Right, so I'm just going to let that heat through a little bit. And then I'm obviously not adding all this cream, just adding a little bit of it. The rest is for the other dish in a minute. I'm going to use that 1.5 tablespoons of that, a bit of salt and pepper. I'm going to put a little pinch of black pepper in, a white pepper, I beg your pardon, in there. And maybe about a 1/4 teaspoon, I think, roughly, of salt should be good. Personal taste. You're the one that's going to eat it. What this is doing actually is helping to dry out, take some of the moisture, I should say, of the from the butternut squash. Now this looks like hardly anything in here, but we have enough to fill at least 12 of this amount, believe me. I know we do at school, we usually get fed up of making them and we give up. we make about 40 and then we give up. So about 2 minutes, just moving it around a little bit from time to time, softens it, not softens it, dries it out a little bit. And then what we're going to do, we're going to add about 1.5 tablespoons of cream. And we want that to be absorbed and evaporate. So 1.5 tablespoons. Excuse me. And mix that in and then let that evaporate, all right, completely. And it should happen fairly quickly. Again, with this small amount, it'll happen pretty quick. So now your mixture is nice and creamy. Give it a minute or so to evaporate. So we've got our shallots, our butternut squash, salt, pepper, and our cream in there, all right? And what we're going to do, we will let this cool. You could put it into a bowl, but we're going to have plenty of time for it to cool just sitting in the pan, unless you want to use the same saute pan for one of the other dishes. And then at the end, we're just going to add some parmesan and nutmeg on. Before I haven't got my nutmeg out. I'm going to grab my nutmeg because I should forget about it otherwise. There we go. All right, so give it a little taste. Make sure it's got enough seasoning for your taste, and then just turn it off. All right. I'm going to set the nutmeg next to it because I'm notorious for doing that and then forgetting to put it in afterwards, so I don't forget. So it's going to sit over there, and then right before we use it, we're going to mix in some Parmesan cheese. We want the Parmesan cheese to mix in, not melt in. That's why we're going to do it cold. You could put the nutmeg in now if you wanted to. Now, sage butter. Now, you could just do regular butter with this. You can do any flavored butter with it. The sage is really nice. If you really don't like sage, you can make a basil butter. You can make a cilantro butter. You could just do butter with something spicy in it, a bit of cayenne pepper in it or something like that. It's a personal taste. But what this is a brown butter sauce. And you just do it plain. Basically, we're going to put the butter in a pan and we're going to, so about 4 tablespoons of butter, roughly. It doesn't matter how much butter because you're just making it for yourself. You want to cook it with the sage until the butter starts to go brown. Very easy to do. Very easy not to, it's much harder to not do it than do it, if you get what I mean. Like burning butter is very easy, which is kind of what you're doing. But basically, you're going to let it go brown, and then you take it off the heat. And then we just serve it over, heat it up, serve it over the ravioli when they're done. All right? Dead simple. With your sage leaves, you're just going to leave them whole, and then we remove them. We let them sit in there after it's made, and then we remove them when we serve it if you wish. So about 6 to 8 leaves of sage with the amount of butter we're going to use. 5. There, I've actually got 8 there. That's great. And then about 4 tablespoons of butter. Again, you can do more, no problem. Oops. There we go. And pop your butter in the pan. Put your sage leaves in with it. Now you can make this the day ahead, put it in the fridge, bring it out, heat it up again, whatever you like. It's not like in hollandaise or something like that. You can't reheat. It's very, very forgiving. They've become, I learned how to do these in culinary school years and years ago, and you never ever saw them on menus. But you do sometimes now see them on menus, particularly served on vegetables. And what it does, it provides a very flavorful sauce on a vegetable without very little work at all, virtually no work at all. It's so easy to do. So they are very popular. I mean, I've had it. It's good on things like, it's good on broccoli, great on cauliflower. You like cauliflower? A brown butter sauce on cauliflower is wonderful. If you want, you can break up your butter a bit. I should cut it in half, that doesn't matter. Oh, there we go. But yeah, on sort of, I've even had it on asparagus. I like it on asparagus too, but I like it on most vegetables. I've had it on Brussels sprouts. And again, you can adjust the seasoning depending on, there are other brown butter sauces which have acid in them as well. Once your butter's melted, as soon as it's melted, you turn it off. You leave it to one side for a few minutes. You then skim off what I call the scum. It isn't scum, but the stuff on the top. And then you gently tip the pan and pour off the yellow liquid. In the bottom is the white milk solids, and you see those as you're pouring it off. And you leave the milk solids behind because that's what burns. That's what goes brown, is the milk solids. So that's when you saute, you want to use clarified butter or butter and oil mixed together, or just oil. Because if you use just butter, the whole point of doing it over high heat means that all those little black bits you get stuck to something is the milk solids that are burnt. So that's what the benefit of clarified butter is. And then, of course, in a lot of cuisines, Indian and other Asian cuisines, I did Malaysian, I did Thai, did Malaysian the other night, and we did clarified butter because they don't, in some of their culture, they don't like to mix dairy, and it's the milk solids part of the butter that's considered dairy. They don't like to mix that with meat. So that's why and it's called ghee. They call it ghee.
Yes, I've seen that. Okay, thank you.
And ghee is the same as clarified butter, all right? But it's very easy to make. All right, can you hear mine sizzling? I'm going to turn this down a bit. It's starting to get a little bit of color. I'm going to show you now. We don't want it to get black. We want it to get nut brown, and it should smell really nutty, all right? And with the small amount we're doing, it gets there pretty quickly, okay? And as I say, you can opt to strain out the sage leaves before you serve it, or you can serve it in there. It's up to you, really. Whatever you want to do. Right, we'll turn this around. I'll go back to the overhead and I'll show you what mine looks like. Mine's almost there. I think. My mouse is weird. It shuts off, which is meant to, I suppose, so it doesn't lose power. But like if I haven't used it for a few minutes, it shuts off, and then I can't. Come on. There it is. Oh, God, technology. One day I'll get good at it, maybe. All right. Okay. So mine is pretty much there. Can you see? Slightly brown. If I lift it right up there, like that. Okay. So once it gets like that, I'm just going to turn it off and then reheat it when we're ready to serve it later on. Okay. All right. Background here. All right. So now we're going to do. We'll do the tomato. We'll do the tomato filling next. Okay. Now again, ideally, this is better with really good tomatoes, which obviously we don't have right now. But it's still a, if you've seasoned it enough, it's a good, very simple, basic tomato sauce. All right. There's nothing clever about it. It's just tomatoes and garlic and basil and stuff. So it's really very straightforward. I've got tonarelli because that's a cut of pasta, which I'll talk about a little bit later. All right, so we're going to use garlic, a couple of cloves of garlic. And if you haven't already, you want to mince those up. There we go. I did it the wrong way. There's one. I need a small one because these are huge. Sometimes you buy garlic and they're enormous. That's exactly what I have here. Come on. That'll do. There we go. All right, so best way to mince garlic. I don't use a garlic press. Too messy to clean up. Doesn't lick all the garlic. So just tap it. Shake out your clove. If you find when you're chopping your garlic, it's sticking to your knife a lot, particularly when you're doing a lot of it, try a bit of salt. Just sprinkle a bit of salt on, and that helps to stop it from sticking together so much. So what you want to do is just roughly chop your garlic first, and then you're going to mince it. And when you mince, flat of your hand on the front of your knife, you mince backwards and forwards with the back 4 or 5 inches of your knife. Oops, got a bit of skin there. Pulling it in, this is where you mince anything. Another bit of skin. Not doing a very good job of that, do I? So nice and small. So really nice and small, okay? Now with our parsley, a couple of sprigs of parsley. One you're going to leave whole. I'll explain why in a minute. And the other one you're going to mix up. If I can actually get it out of here, there we go. So one we're going to leave whole like that because that's going to flavor our liquid. And the other one, just a little bit. Cut it up and then mix that as well. Again, nice and small, you shouldn't really be able to see any leaves. Okay. And then your basil. I did wash this earlier on. If you haven't washed it, you should wash it and dry it with paper towel before you try and chop it up. It makes it much easier to chop it if it's dry than if it's wet. Okay. Obviously, I'm just pulling off the leaves. The nice thing with basil, it's easy to pull the leaves. Oops. Off the stalks, unlike the parsley, really. Woo. So, same thing here. Usually with the basil, I'll grab it together like this, chop it up a little bit first, big slices, and then mix the same. realized I chopped up the cloves of garlic. I wasn't thinking. If you have another clove of garlic, we're going to add one whole. I just wasn't thinking when we did that with the, if you don't worry about it. But if you do have one, we're going to leave it whole because we're going to flavor the oil with it and then take it out. Sorry, I was just take the skin off and leave it whole. I got carried away with my chopping technique there. Oops. There we go. Up there with that. All right, so don't forget, don't use all your garlic. Well, you can, but it might be a bit strong if you use all your garlic if you chopped up two and use another one. And then our tomatoes. Now, how do we peel our tomatoes? Best way to peel them is to get some hot water. And bring it to a boil, okay? Take your tomatoes and in one end, make a cut like an X across the bottom like that, not just like into them a little bit like that. Also, there is a gadget which I have at school, which is wonderful. It's called a serrated peeler. It's made by OXO, and you can peel a tomato without having to do this. You just peel it like you peel an apple, but it'll work for soft fruits as well. It'll work for peaches, nectarines, things like that. And it peels around, just like it looks just like a, you know, just like a regular peeler like this, but it has a serrated edge on it, and it peels. Unless your tomato is really, really soft, it works pretty well. So, while we're waiting for that water to boil, let's just take a little, hold on. I'm going to grab another pot, a medium sort of pot, all right? In here, what we're going to do is about a 1/4 cup of olive oil. All right, and what I want you to do is to put that whole sprig and the whole clove of garlic in there. And I want you to leave it in until that oil just starts to sizzle. When it sizzles, we take the garlic out and the strip of parsley, because basically we're just flavoring the oil, and we're going to discard that. It's just to add a bit of flavor to the oil before we start cooking it. All right? So with the tomatoes, as I say, with the cross in the bottom, we're going to put them in the hot water for about 10-15 seconds, peel the outside off, cut them in half, take the seeds out, and then cut them into strips before we cook them. All right? Taking the seeds out means you don't get all the seeds in the sauce, and also the skin, you don't really want the skin in there, ideally. So it's nice to take it out, and then cutting it in strips makes it easier to eat and serve and everything else. All right? And then what else? Yeah, we're good. Okay, that's good. Wayward basil leaf there. All right, mine's starting to sizzle. So grab a pair of tongs and discard that and that. Now, as we're waiting for our tomatoes, just turn your oil off for a minute. All right, because we don't want it to continue cooking and getting too hot, all right? Once you get that water at the back to a simmer, you can put your tomatoes in it. Leave them in for about 10 to 15 seconds, take them out, and then we'll just peel them with a small knife, okay? Watch pot never boils. Oh, I've got a simmer going on there. Yeah. All right, I'm going to put my tomatoes in. I've got a bit of a simmer. Put them in the cut side down. And about 8 to 10 seconds in, turn them over, all right? And that will help to release the skin. And if you take one out and the skin doesn't release, then you can pop it back in. And if the riper the tomatoes are, the quicker the skins will come up. I have one that's more ripe than the other, so the others may take a little bit longer. So I'm going to take that one out first. It's nearly there, not quite. If you can feel it, take it out and just feel it. If it doesn't feel like it's going to come off, then leave it a little bit longer. All right, I think this one. I think my first one is good. I'm just going to peel the skin off. I can see it's got a crack in the skin there. They're going to be a bit hot. You can run them under cold water if you want. But this one was the riper of the three. It was a little riper from the other one, so the skin's pretty much coming off. You should just be able to pull it off with your fingers. You might need a little bit of help with the edge of the knife, particularly as they're hot. All right, there we go. And that one too. All right, so that one's done. Yeah, these were a little. So I'm just going to cut this one in half. I'll just show you the way to get the seeds out. So seeds are in here like this. I'm going to put my thumb in and scoop the seeds out with my thumbs. All right. Most of them. We've got a few left in there, it doesn't matter, okay? Okay, let's get these other two out. That one's done. That one's done too. All right, so skin should come off pretty easily. Mind you don't burn yourselves. Cutting in the bottom just helps to get on, to get the for the water to get under the skin. That one came off great. Whoop. Hot. Ah. Don't have asbestos fingers for this. Woo. There we go, last piece. All right. So all my skin off. Might be a bit on the bottom. I'll see when I turn them. I'm going to let those two cool for a second because they're kind of hot. And then with this one that I've just cut up, put it face down. Just cut it in strips. All right. Take out that middle bit when you get to it. The stem end. And then a bit more skin on this one at the bottom. You may find the skin sticks a bit around the stem end a little bit. You may just want to trim that off. So seeds out. Give it a little squeeze as well. That will get some of the seeds out. First time time I did this recipe, we did it with all little tomatoes. Oh, it took flipping ages. I decided that was not a good idea, unless I have an overabundance of little tomatoes. It takes far too long. Because when we do it at the school, we're usually doing 2 pounds of tomatoes. And stand there peeling and seeding 2 pounds of little tiny tomatoes was no fun. All right. So all the seeds out, and then we're going to cut it all into strips. And we're going to put it back into that pan that we just took the other stuff out of. Cut out your middle bit because you don't want that middle stem in there. There we go. All right, got my hands on it. So they are going to go back in into your oil, not with the extra basil yet. The basil is going to go into the basil and the extra garlic is going to go in at the end, so then it will soften and be nice and not be burnt. All right. So put that in. Put your heat back under, and let it come to a simmer. And you're going to cook it uncovered for about 10-15 minutes. All right. And then we will add the extra little bit of parsley, the basil, and the garlic. All right. So I'm going to put those together in a little bowl so that we can move on to our third filling. So we have plenty of time to do our so there we go. Let's see this. All right, so our third thing we're going to make, or our second sauce, one filling, 2 sauces, is the mushroom, sun-dried tomato, pea filling. All right, so for that we have some butter and some olive oil, 2 thin slices of onion quartered, just a little bit of onion, all right? 6 tablespoons roughly of sun-dried tomatoes. Now my sun-dried tomatoes are already cut into strips, like this. If yours aren't, cut them into strips, all right? And then we have about a 1/4 pound of mushrooms we're gonna slice, and some frozen peas, cream, and grated cheese, Romano or Parmesan. So with your mushrooms now, to clean your mushrooms, it's best to just use a damp paper towel rather than washing them. All right? Rub it over the outside of your mushrooms, like that. You can choose whether you want to remove the stems or just trim them. It's up to you. There's my onion. So with these, I'm just going to trim mine down and then just about a 1/4 inch wide slices, okay? So for this, you will need another small to medium skillet, or if you're going to use the same one that you did the butternut squash in, that's fine. Just wash it out. All right, there is my mushroom. Okay, now I've got about a 1/4 of an onion here because it's only a small amount of onion. So I'm going to just cut the end off, and I'm going to cut this into about 4 slices, like 4 or 5 slices. Just cut the whole thing. I know I said into quarters, but that's using a whole onion, which we're not because we're only making a small amount. So my small amount of onion there, my sun-dried tomatoes. Where on earth are my peas? My peas are somewhere. I will find my peas in a second. Oh, there they are, hiding. This is my peas and my cream, olive oil, and butter. Okay? So, break the tomatoes up a little bit as they're cooking. Let's move our tomatoes to the back, or, I'm going to move mine away from the front burner. And then I have this. Now, what we're going to do with this, so we have all our ingredients here: cream, butter, sun-dried tomatoes, peas, olive oil, mushrooms, and onions. Okay, and then obviously I've got grated Parmesan cheese, which we'll use later. So what we're going to do, we're going to melt the butter and the oil together in the skillet. Half a stick of butter and 2 tablespoons of olive oil. All right, we're going to melt that first, and then we're going to add the onions to it and cook the onions first. So for speed, I suggest, let's cut your butter up a bit. It's a little easier. It'll melt easier, it's more quickly, is what I'm trying to say. Pop that in. Now, remember, Anita and I were talking about clarified butter. Now, if we just use the butter on its own, that's when we get the, we'd have a problem with the butter burning. So by adding the oil to it, it raises the burning temperature, in other words, protects the butter from burning, all right? So we have the 2 tablespoons of oil as well. We're going to let that melt. And then we are going to add our mushrooms. So we're going to add dry sun-dried tomatoes with the onions, I beg your pardon, and then we add the mushrooms and the peas. All right? The reason we add the sun-dried tomatoes first is they need to cook a bit longer because they're dry. I love sun-dried tomatoes. I can eat them like this. They're great. One thing I just realized I didn't add to your shopping list. This is the one we get to the pasta. You either need a little stack of clean dish towels, or if you happen to have like a tablecloth that you don't care about too much, because we want to lay the pasta out and then cover it over so it doesn't dry out while we're working with it. Dish towels work fine. Any big sort of cloth will work fine. So you might want to get that. Okay, so in go my onions and my sun-dried tomatoes. So again, those go in first because we want them to cook a little longer, the sun-dried tomatoes. And so we're putting them in before we add our mushrooms. Break them up, they're stuck together. I'm doing the time. Oh, okay, so good. The onions are slightly softened and the sun-dried tomatoes are slightly softened as well. All right? Not completely, because we're going to add the other ingredients as well, and that will continue to soften. We will wait to put the cream and the grated cheese in to the end. All right? Otherwise, it sometimes separates out, and we don't really want that.
How many sun-dried tomatoes did you use?
About 6 tablespoons. I think I was a little heavy. I think I might have maybe half a cup because I love them. Doesn't matter. But yeah, at least 6 tablespoons is good. I think I've definitely got a good half cup in here. I just kind of went like this, put them in a bowl. the end of my. So you really want those tomatoes nice and soft. Remember the bits in the middle are, you know, a little firmer. They take longer to cook. So make sure that they're really nice and soft. Now my sun-dried tomatoes feel soft. My onions don't yet, not quite. I'll give another sort of 30 seconds or whatever. A bit more. You should be able to get a lovely smell of the sun-dried tomatoes coming off from this. Interesting, no garlic in this recipe. You could put some in, but there isn't any. I think you don't need it with all the strength of the flavors that are in here. But there's no reason why you couldn't add the garlic, but I would probably add it towards the end. Yeah, my onions are sort of halfway there, a bit more. So I am now going to add my mushrooms and my peas. I'm using a fairly small skillet, so I don't want to get too much evaporation in there. Turn my heat down a little bit. There we go. So we just want to cook this long enough for the mushrooms to get soft. Obviously the peas will cook really quickly. All right, so we're all good. I just wanted to give you guys time to catch up. That's what it was. All right, so if you can't hear me or anything, let me know, but I think we're good. All right, so there is, and I'm going to turn that off. All right. Okay, so we're going to move on to the pasta now, guys, okay? I think my tomatoes are pretty much cooked. I'm just going to turn them off and put those other ingredients in. That's the basil, the garlic, and a little bit of parsley. Stir it in, and we will correct the seasoning of that a little bit later, okay? So hopefully you guys can all see me. Can you see my, I don't think you can see my overhead view now, can you? Oh, all right, hold on 1 second. Let me just see, because I really want you to, can you see the overhead view as well? Okay, so pasta machine. Does everybody have a pasta machine, or are some of you rolling out by hand? No pasta machine. I'm going to show you how to use the machine, and then you can also roll your dough out by hand, okay? Rolling your dough out by hand will make you go out and buy a pasta machine, believe me. So if you have your pasta machine, you want to secure it to your table, all right? You will want a little bowl of flour next to you, whether you're doing it by hand or not. If you're doing it by hand, I would suggest you take about a quarter of one of those, the main pieces that we made, cut it in quarters, and you're going to roll that out on a floured surface with a rolling pin, as thin as you can get it, right? And I'll roll some out by hand as well in a minute. With the pasta machine, we also are going to divide our main batch of dough into 4 workable lots, okay? So as I say, if you click on the overhead, you can watch me, or you can just watch me on the other way. It's entirely up to you. Keep the rest of your dough covered or in your bag, all right, because it will dry out a bit. Divide it in about 4. Any more than that, it makes it hard to work with. So it's better to do it in smaller amounts, all right? So in the pasta machine, so if you're doing the pasta machine, I want you to take that piece, flatten it out into a little rectangle, like this. Then take flour and just gently rub it on both sides. Now, if you're doing this, rolling it out by hand, you can do the same thing, but not too much flour, just a tiny bit, and then shake it off, all right? And you've got like a rectangle if you're putting it through the machine, all right? If you're doing it by hand, you basically want to roll it out into a long rectangle, all right? Because we'll cut it like that, and then we'll even do it for the ravioli like that as well. So on your pasta machine, you want you've got the dial on the side, it has numbers on it. Now, sometimes number 1 is the biggest gap, sometimes number 8 is. Mine, number 1 is the biggest, so I've got it as wide as it will go. Like that. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to put my handle in, and I'm going to slowly roll my dough through it once. And then once I've rolled it, I'm going to take a little bit more flour, and literally just like a tiny bit of flour. You're going to put it on your fingers and like rub it over the surface like that. And again, if you're rolling out by hand, you may not need to do that very much. You want to keep, as far as putting flour, put flour underneath, but keep flour on your rolling pin. It's better than flouring the top after the first time, all right? Then what I'm going to do by doing the machine, I'm going to roll it in, put it into thirds like that. I fold it into thirds, and then I'm going to put it the other way back through the machine again. And you want to do this about 2 or 3 times, flouring and making sure you get a bit of flour on the edges. If it's stuck a bit on the edges, both sides. So now I've done this 3 times, Anita. But I think it's only you're the only one with the machine. So now when you've done this 2 or 3 times, you're then going to go down one side. So if it's number 1, you're going to go to 2. If it's 8, you're going to go to number 7. And this is where we start thinning out. Put a little bit more flour on both sides again. And then you're going to put it through your machine. So once you go to the number 2, you're going to run it through the machine 2 times. And it's going to be 2 times on each number. Now, if your dough still feels slightly sticky, add a bit more flour. Shake it off. All right. So I've done 2 times through on that. Now I'm going to go down to my next number, next smallest number, and I'm going to run it through again. You guys that haven't got a machine, if you have a pizza cutter, that'll be the easiest thing for you to cut your spaghetti with. All right, if you've got a pizza cutter, you'll get it nice and accurate. It doesn't matter if you don't, but you'll get it really nice and accurate if you have a pizza cutter, okay? So Anita, again, twice on each number. And if you're going from 1, you probably want to go up to 5. It depends on each machine. If you're doing 8, you probably want to go 8, 7, 6, 5, down to 4, I suppose.
Mine starts at 7 and goes down to 1.
Okay, then you're probably going to go down to either 3 or 4. It will depend because they do roll out different thicknesses. If you know you've got a sticky spot, put a bit more flour on. If you don't, you shouldn't have to add more flour now. I can see, you should be able to see light through it a little. Like you should be able to see daylight outside. Not, that's kind of what you're looking for. All right. And the same with you guys at hand rolling. That's what's going to be hard for you because you to get it that thin. All right. But you want to get it as thin as you can. Now, Anita, when you've got to that point, what I say, if your piece is as long as mine, like this, I would cut it in half in the middle. And you guys are going to do the same, even with your stuff you've rolled out. Once you've got it as thin as you can, I want you to lay it on in a single layer of tablecloth, clean dish towels, whatever, all right? I'm laying mine out over here, right next to each other, and I'm putting another sheet on the top so that they don't dry out too much. So I'm going to let me roll a piece. Anita, you carry on with your dough, doing some more. I'm going to roll a piece out by hand and show the girls. Move my pasta machine up a bit. And again, don't feel you've got to do all your dough right now, guys. You might just want to do some of it and do some more of it later on. It's up to you, all right? particularly when you're hand rolling. So I want you to try and aim, if you saw those pieces of mine, they were about 4 or 5 inches wide and then just long, all right? Just make sure you keep moving your dough around so it doesn't stick to your table or your work surface or whatever you're using, all right? And don't worry if it's not completely uniform in size, it doesn't matter because you're going to cut it anyway. It'll be fine, but it is tricky to get it as thin as you really want it, but you'll just have to go as thin as you can. It does tend to spring back a little bit too. So you can see I got a lot thinner with the other one, but that's okay. All right, I can see a bit of daylight through it, just about. Give it a stretch. All right, we'll go with another piece of my machine. How's everybody doing? You okay? Anita and whoever else it was, remember to go back to number 1 when you start on your second piece. A rookie mistake. So I say you guys will have plenty of time to finish this later on, particularly you poor guys doing this by hand. You may want to just go through the exercise a few times and then we'll, as long as we've got enough, you kind of want, if you've got about 6 strips, 5 or 6 strips, that should be good. And then you can, you know, to start filling, and then you can always finish them later on. Oop. Sleeves are getting in the way. Okay, let's see. Done one. So can you guys see that having it a little wet is better than having it too dry? If it's too dry, it just cracks and then it won't go through the machine, or even rolling out, it's harder. Rolling out by hand. And I like to do it through twice, but if you really get pushed for time, sometimes I skip a couple of times and just do once on a couple of sizes, particularly as it gets thinner. Now, if you get a long piece on the end like this, I know that's just going to get longer, so I actually tend to fold that up sometimes to sort of make it, if I can get it through the machine. There we go. So that I don't got a really skinny end, because you end up throwing that bit away anyway. Oop. Little catch on the corner there. One more for me. Now, my dough has got a little cord up here, so I am going to run this through a second time. It just got kind of gravitated over to the corner and got a little stuck on that piece. That's okay. There we go. And if you find at any time while you're doing this and it's getting a little hard to manage, then just cut it in half. Do half at a time if it's getting too long. If you're not tall enough. You want to try and work at trying to keep it in the middle, because you don't want it to get stuck in those corners, which is what happened to mine just then. Easier said than done. All right. make sure you lay it out flat because it will stick together otherwise. And then it'll be halfway here to cut. Stuck a little bit. Okay. All right, I'm going to do one more piece and check on our time here. Yes, we've got time. Whoop. There. Right. Getting tennis elbow, rolling that dough out. Now, if you find that you're rolling this out, you have one piece or one piece a little thicker than the other, keep that for the ravioli because you really want it. It's better if it's slightly thicker for the ravioli than it is for the spaghetti itself. All pasta machines come with these standard 2 cuts on them. One is a fettuccine, the other one is that tonarelli that I'm talking about, which is also known as chitarra or guitar. And it was traditionally done before there were machines like this by literally having a piece of wood, like a wood box, that had like guitar strings or similar to guitar strings stretched across the top, and you would put the dough, you would roll the dough over it, and it would cut the pasta into that square shape because it's actually square, not round, that little one. And that's what would happen with the guitar pasta. It would go square, not round. And it's called C-H-I-T-E-R-R-A, chitarra. And that is a common cut, pasta cut that's used in Italy more than we don't really tend to see it here so much. But we have spaghetti and linguine, which are round. These are not round. You can buy attachments for your machine for different cuts as well. You can buy a ravioli cutter as well. Although, unless you're making ravioli a lot, I don't think it's really necessary. Because you can make, I'll show you, I mean, I've got a little contraption to make it in, but you can make it by hand using a cookie cutter or just cutting it yourself. Okay, how is everybody doing? How's the rolling out going? Tricky? Okay. I'll do one more and then we'll do some forming and some cutting. What I suggest you do is I would do this now, stop for a second. Put some water on to cook your pasta. So what I suggest you do, if you want to cook it now, you don't have to. You want a large amount of boiling salted water. And as I say, you may choose not to do it now, you may just choose to let yours get dry and cook it later on. I like to cook my ravioli in something shallow. I have like a sort of like a Dutch oven, not really. I have a deep fry pan here that I would use for the ravioli because it's easy to get them in and out. And you can cook more at one time. Now remember that when we do cook this pasta, it cooks a lot quicker than dried. All right? So for the skinny one, it's literally going to be like 2 minutes. For the other one, fettuccine, maybe 3 or 4 minutes, that's all right? And as I say, you guys do not need to cook yours right now if you'd rather not. I'm just going to do it so I can show you. Because I'm sure you're going to want to eat this a bit later on. It'd be nicer if it's fresh. Or just cook a little bit as an exercise. You do need salt in your water. Do not go to all the trouble of making beautiful pasta and not salt in your water, okay? About a teaspoon a quart. So a decent amount. All right. And I'm going to put those on and roll out this last batch of dough I'm going to work with. And I'm going to show you how to cut it. I do not have a pizza cutter here, I don't think. But you may find that easier because it's easier to cut straight lines with a pizza cutter. All right. This dough I made by hand is a little drier, so I'm not actually using any flour with this because it doesn't need it. But it definitely needs the folding because it's a bit more rusticy looking than the other one. But it's going through the machine fine, so that's why I know I don't need any extra flour. As I say, it's a trial and error thing, this, guys. You'll get, I know you watch me on screen, but it wouldn't make any difference if you're actually in the school. First time you do it, you don't know what you're doing. And then next time you do, oh yeah, I remember last time that when I did that, I did this, I needed more flour because of this or that. And it's good to watch somebody do it and get instruction, but nothing can beat actually making it yourself and keep making it yourself. Practice makes perfect. That saying goes, excuse me, sir, how do I get to Carnegie Hall? Practice, man, practice. Right. In that one corner when I get to the last, never mind. I'll use this for, not very pretty.
Dana, I have one piece that completely, it all goofed up.
You have one what?
I have one strip that it all just kind of collapsed. Is there any way to resurrect it?
Yeah, just smush it back together. Smush it back.
I've got this.
Well, just smush it back together, flatten it out, and put it back through your machine. I don't re-roll leftovers. I mean, I might if I was just doing it for us at home, but you generally don't want to do that. But if that's happened to it, like mine, this wasn't too pretty. This one I need to put through, so I'm actually it didn't fall back on itself, but I'm going to put it back through the machine again because it doesn't look too lovely. All right, there we go. Okay, so, all right, it's 22. So I want to get some of this rolled out for you. Now, if you were in a place where you can stop, that would be great. What can I do? I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to make your ravioli. So, with your ravioli mixture, remember we have it over here. I'm going to add my pinch of nutmeg to it. All right. Something else I got to put in there. What is now? Oh, no, that's it. Oh, my Parmesan cheese. I'm putting Parmesan cheese in. All right. So I'm going to grate my Parmesan cheese in. And just mix it in. I'm going to leave it in this pan because it saves me washing up. All right, so that's my mixture. All right. Okay, let me undo this. So you may want to go to my, I don't know whether I can get you on my overhead, but I think you can click on my overhead, can't you? This is, if you click overhead, you'll be able to see. Okay, so there we go. All right, so I have this little thing, which I love, all right? They're not expensive. They're about $14, $16. They're on Amazon, and you can get them at PenMac and stuff. It's a two-part ravioli maker. It makes small ravioli. This, the bottom bit, this is the top bit that you put on top. So I'm going to show you how I use that first, and then I'm going to show you a couple of other ways as well. So for this, you do need to spray. If you have one of these, don't do what I did the first time I used it on KDKA. I wasn't paying attention. I didn't spray it, all stuck. I had to try and get it out on live television. So that wasn't too clever. But, oh, this spray is sticking. So spray it all over and spray. This has got, it's the bit underneath that you spray. It doesn't look like that's the part you spray, but you spray the underneath like this. All right. So, and I'm going to show you a different way of doing it. You're going to take a flat piece of your dough on this thing, and I'm going to lay it on here like this. Press it down gently, and then I'm going to put my filling in. All right, so the trick is here not to overfill, okay? So I'm going to take a little bit of the filling, like not even a teaspoon, like that. And again, these are great. As I say, you can do it all by hand. You don't have to have one of these. I just think they're kind of cool, and they're not madly expensive. Some of these things that you buy are really expensive, but this really isn't. So it's kind of and it doesn't take up a lot of room in your kitchen or anything like that. So it's quite a good thing to have. All right, so that's those. Now, what I'm going to do is put my water down a minute. All right, so what's a good thing to do is we want to make sure that our pasta sticks together. So I'm taking a little pastry brush, and you'll do this no matter what you're doing, and I'm going to go all around the outside and in between where all the little raviolis are going to form. So that will enable them to stick. And you will do the same thing even if you're doing this by hand. If it's a little short in a place, give it a gentle pull because you want it to come to the outside of the frame. And and then it's magic. You take the frame like this with the bumpy bits on the bottom, you turn it over and you put this on top and you gently press down. You can cut off your end pieces that you're not using here. And if you look, I have my bumpy bits through there. Okay? That's the, and then what you do, make sure you do this on a floured surface. Gently lift the top off, like that. Take the ravioli, tip it out onto a floured surface, and gently, it should come off. This was a bit on KDK that didn't work. And you have it like this, and then I will cut off the extra from around the outside. And I'm going to cut through here, and make, whoop, sorry, make my ravioli. Now, you want to put them on something, on a floured cookie sheet or something, because otherwise they're going to stick. Now I've got enough room. All right, so I've cut through those. Gently going to make sure I cut through them properly. Lay them on my cookie sheet, and then this is how you would freeze them, like this, or they go straight into your pot of water. Oops. All right, so that's one way of doing it. A couple of other things you can do. You can buy this little contraption, which is got serrated edges. I must admit, don't particularly like it. All right, I don't think it cuts very well. I think you're better off with a regular good old-fashioned cookie cutter. If you do the cookie cutter, just put these over here, you can make bigger ones. The downside with these little ones is that they are little. All right, so you may decide they're too small. I must admit, I've only ever seen these this size. It doesn't mean they don't come bigger. They probably do. Okay. All right, so if you were going to do it with a cookie cutter, I've probably got enough dough here to just do this with. You can do one of two things. You can roll out a whole, you can take a whole strip. Put a bit more flour on here. Whole strip on your works table. Gently take your cookie cutter and just mark. Don't cut through. Just mark. I'm just going to do the 3 there. All right. So now I can get 3 out of that piece. I could do 6 and do the other half. And then put your filling in. And obviously you can put a bit more filling in these. I've probably got enough for about 3 of these, I think. And then you should do the same thing. Take your water, just mark around a little, sorry, just wipe around the outer edge, all the way around like that. This is probably a little full actually. And then fold your other piece over, like that. And then take your cookie cutter, oops, and cut. All the way through like that, all right? When you've cut through, I'll do this in a minute, take a fork and seal the edges all the way around like that. Okay? Make sure you get the air out. All the way around like that, okay? So that's, as I say, then you can make them whatever size you like. Let me do the last one, and then I'll show you how to cut the pasta. Now, if you're cutting just with a knife or and And I mean, there are a lot of pastas that you do cut with a knife. I cut other shapes just with a knife. I roll out the dough in the machine and then cut it with a knife. You want to try and cut straight lines. That's why I suggested using a, what's it cutter? You know, a pizza cutter. Sorry, I can't talk and chew gum today. A pizza cutter because it just makes it more even. You don't have to use a pizza cutter. It's fine. All right. I'm going to throw these into my, now when you do ravioli, you want your water just to be simmering, not bubbling really hard, because if it bubbles really hard, it's going to pop the ravioli open, and you don't want that. So I usually cook these for about 3 minutes. The argument is they should rise to the surface like pierogies, but that's not always the case because if you've got air under there, like those little ones I made with the cookie cutter, there was a bit of air in them, so they're rising to the surface straight away. So let's cut this one. Whoop. There we go. All right, I've got a horrible mess here. Okay, as far as yeah, let's cut the other pasta first. As I said, on your machine, you have two cuts. You have the fettuccine, and you have the little skinny tortorelli. Now, the reason we put the dough out like that is to let it dry a little bit, but we covered it so it doesn't dry too much. So you want to start, if you're going to put it to a machine or if you're cutting by hand, with the first piece you rolled out. Now, again, you guys rolling out, it's not quite as important because it's not going to get stuck in the machine. But it will be easier to cut if it's a little drier, all right? God, what a mess, Kana. All right, let me move this out of the way. So I'm going to take one of the first pieces I did. You have to move your handle on your machine to the particular cutter you're going to use, and you basically are just going to run this through. It usually needs a little bit of help to get started.
At what number? Or there's no. You don't have to worry about the numbers on the machine.
No, there is no number. Just gently pull it out the other end. And it should cut. If it's too damp, it tends to stick together, particularly the skinny stuff. So I'm going to do a couple of these, and then I'll do a couple of the skinny ones. Whoop. Yeah, oh, they're out, cool. Sometimes it needs a little bit of help to get going. All right, I'm going to do a bit of skinny. This should feel fairly dry. And also, again, if your piece is still too long, cut it in half, all right? When I do pasta with the kids, I try and avoid making the skinny because they always mess it up. It's kind of hard to get it just right because if it's not dry enough, if it's too dry, it cracks. See, mine worked okay because I think mine was just dry enough that it came fairly even. All right, I'm going to do one more of those. And then I'm going to, oh, I've got that on there. Now, so I'm sure you guys have all got, you've got dough left over. Now, when you're doing it cutting by hand, you can cut it any size you want. If you like pappardelle, a great big thick one, you can do that. That's the beauty of doing it by hand. And if I'm doing it thicker, if I'm doing pappardelle or whatever, or anything, I do it obviously cut it by hand. All right. So I am going to put a little bit of both of my pastas in the water. Now, with the real skinny, literally I'm going to put it in. It's going to be in there about 2 to 3 minutes. And then the thicker one, I've got in the back there. And that's probably going to be in 3 to 4 minutes. All right. Now, the best way I think to check the ravioli is basically to take one out and cut it open and see how it tastes. And see if it's cooked through. It's not sort of very scientific, but I think that works pretty well to see if it's done. See, just sort the guy out. Whoop. All right. Okay, woo. Hot. Perfect. So, few last things to do. Add your cream to your mushroom sauce, and you can either heat it up now or heat it up later. And then same with your tomato sauce, that's going to heat up. Let me get I'm going to put the ravioli in a bowl. Salted spoon. Got one salted spoon. I'm salted spoonless. Got loads of salted spoons. Where are they all? That's weird. Can't find a salted spoon. All right, I'm going to drain my ravioli because I can't find the salted spoon. That's really strange. I've got loads of them. Let me take this over here. Ow. It's too hot. There we go. All right. Kill that. I'm going to get the spaghetti out first. I don't want it to cook anymore. So there is my spaghetti in there. All right, I'm going to get my own solid spoon. So with the ravioli, what you will do, and again, you don't have to do it right now, is you're going to reheat that ravioli sauce. Sorry, the sage butter, and pour that over the top. Okay? Gonna do that quickly. There we go. So I have my sage butter back here. I'm just going to heat it up a little bit. I'm going to strain out my the sage. And my let me put that pasta in the bowl. All right, so that's the regular pasta, which I'm going to put the tomatoes on. And then the other one, if you're not sure if it's done, take a piece out and check it. If it's done to, I know this looks done to me, but it's done to the way you want it. You know, it's al dente or more cooked as you would like. Okay. All right, my sage butter is warm. So the sage butter, I like to do it without the leaves. I just pour it right on the top of that right there. And if you'll forgive me, I'm not going to put the sauces on the other pasta because, you know, I'll want to reheat it later, and I want to reheat it without, you know, without the sauce mixed in with it. But there's my two pastas right there. I'm going to put a little bit of butter on because I think it needs a little bit of butter. To make sure it doesn't stick together as it's going to sit. Just toss it with a little bit of butter. And there we go. Oops. Okay, so I have both my cream sauce right in here, which I'm going to leave in the pan. Right there. Basically, you would just heat that and add, you're going to add a little bit of cheese to it. Just heat it up till it's hot. Pour that right over the ravioli. And then the tomato sauce, you will need to season. Mine does need salt and pepper. It goes down quite a lot, pretty garlicky in there, okay? As you can see. And that I would normally do with the skinny tonarelli. And as I season it with salt and pepper, or you could spice it up a little bit as well if you wanted to. All right. Well, I hope you don't mind that I didn't put it on there because I know that we want to eat these later. So. So I hope everyone had fun. If you think of anything else, any other questions, if you roll out some more dough later or whatever, or you have any questions, I'm around all day. Just either shoot me an email or you can even call me at school because the phone